Hey, government class. This is Tuesday, April 21st, and we're getting into foreign affairs this week, foreign affairs and diplomacy. So, I want to go ahead and jump right in with the discussion of isolationism and internationalism. Isolationism is just a very long-standing American tradition of kind of feeling ourselves to be isolated on both sides, east and west, by great oceans, and not really having to worry too much about military assaults from Canada or Mexico. So, tendency to pull inward and not wanting to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world. Whereas internationalism is just what it sounds like, the kind of tendency to be more international, kind of outward facing in our dealings with other countries. So, with the coming of independence, and then for more than 150 years, the American people were chiefly concerned with domestic affairs, with events at home. Foreign affairs, this nation's relationships with other nations, were of little or no concern to them. Through that period, American foreign relations were very largely shaped by a policy of isolationism, a purposeful refusal to become generally involved in the affairs of the rest of the world. So, the refusal by design to be all that involved in whatever might be going on in Europe or in Asia or whatnot. The period from the 1940s onward, however, has been marked by a profound change in the place of the United States in world affairs. The coming of World War II finally convinced the American people that neither they nor anyone else can live in isolation. That in many ways, and whether we like it or not, the world of today is indeed one world. The well being of everyone in this country, in fact, the very survival of the United States, is affected by much that happens elsewhere on the globe. If nothing else, the realities of ultra rapid travel and instantaneous communications make it clear that we now live in a global village. Okay, so it's not, can't really be America versus the rest of the world anymore. It's, we are part of the world, kind of the whole it takes a village thing. Wars and other political upheavals abroad have had an impact on the United States and on the daily lives of the American people. 5 times over the past century, the United States fought major wars abroad, and in several other instances, it has committed its armed forces to lesser but significant foreign conflicts. The ongoing war in Afghanistan, terrorist plots in Europe, Asia, and at home, the continuing Arab Israeli disputes in the Middle East, threats posed by rogue states like Iran, these and other circumstances around the globe threaten the security of the United States. Now, remember, this book is about 7 years old. It was published in 2013. Um, so a lot hasn't changed since this book was published, but as we've talked about before, the last year and a half have been real big times of change. In particular, now, just the last 2 or 3 months with the COVID-19 virus, which is a worldwide pandemic. This affects 185 countries, and so the response to it is and must be, at least in some degree, international. It can't just be American because it didn't arise in the United States. It was brought here by people who had visited abroad, China or Italy, particularly. And so we live in a global era. Economic conditions elsewhere in the world also have a direct and often immediate effect on and in this country. The American economy has become an intertwined part of a truly global economy linked by international banking, multinational corporations, and worldwide investments that transcend national boundaries. Clearly, today's world cannot be described as one world in all respects, however. The planet remains, in many ways, a very fractured and dangerous place. In the interconnected yet divided world of today, only those policies that protect and promote the security of all nations can assure the security and well being of the United States. And we're seeing that now with some of our own government's current attacks on certain multinational or transnational entities like NATO, North American Treaty Organization, which is among other groups, World Health Organizations, and other that have been under attack by the Trump administration. Okay, every nation's foreign policy is actually many different policies on many different topics. It is made up of all of the stands and actions that a nation takes in every aspect of its relationships with other countries: diplomatic, military, commercial, and all others. To put the point another way, a nation's foreign policy includes everything that the nation's government says and everything it does in world affairs. Okay. Thus, American foreign policy consists of all the federal government's official statements and all of its actions as it conducts this nation's foreign relations. It involves treaties and alliances, international trade, the defense budget, foreign economic and military aid, the United States, and other international organizations, nuclear weapons testing, and disarmament negotiations. It also includes the American position on oil imports, grain exports, human rights, immigration, climate change, space exploration, fishing rights, cultural exchange programs, economic sanctions, computer technology exports, and a great many other matters. And again, of course, right now, international response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some aspects of foreign policy remain largely unchanged over time. For example, an insistence on freedom of the seas has been a basic part of American policy from the nation's beginnings. Other policies were more flexible. 2 decades ago, resisting the ambitions of the Soviet Union was a basic part of American foreign policy. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States and Russia have built close, if not always friendly, political, military, and economic ties. The United States has also developed close relations with several other former Soviet republics. This, of course, is very troubled in our time, this relationship with the former Soviet Union, the largest republic of which is Russia, of course. Russia pretty clearly interfered pretty heavily in the 2016 elections. They are believed to be doing so again in this year's elections. This is not the action of a friendly nation. So our ties with Russia are pretty strained at this point. The president is both the nation's chief diplomat and the commander-in-chief of its armed forces. Constitutionally and by tradition, the president bears the major responsibility for both making and conducting foreign policy. The president depends on a number of officials and agencies, Hamilton's assistants or deputies, to meet the immense responsibilities that come with this dual role. Here we will examine the president's diplomatic support. In the next section, we will look at the defense and military departments. Okay, so we're wanting to look particularly for today at the definitions for, foreign affairs, which is the nation's relationships with other nations, and isolationism, which is a purposeful refusal to become generally involved in the affairs of the rest of the world. Okay, guys, sorry this was a little late today, had some technical issues, but I'll go ahead and get this online now, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.